Good evening, everybody. Hello, I'm back. Only I'm not at the studio, as you might, at Studio A. So what's going on tonight? Well, the thing is that the weather is terrible. The weather is terrible. It's been raining all day yesterday. It's been raining all day today. It's intensifying right now. The lightning and the thunder has started, and we're getting these gusts of wind that are over, I don't know, 45 miles an hour or so. So I got in touch with my cousin Sherry, who was going to be on the show with me tonight. And I said, hey, Sherry, listen, I don't know if it's as bad as it is where you are as where it is where I am, but do you really want to drive down in this? And what's your schedule like tomorrow? Do you want to come on tomorrow when we're talking about Tartaria? She said, yeah, that'd be fine, because it is crazy. It's a massive storm, apparently. Because she's like, I don't know, 45 minutes north of me. So yeah, here we are tonight. We got two guests, but none in the studio, because of course this is the walk-in closet. And there's no room in the fighter jet. It is a single seater. And there will also be no cameos by little tiny Aurora, because she's up in bed and she's got a fever. So last night we had a nice little birthday night. Me, Lauren, the baby, Aurora, and my mother and Anthony went out to a hibachi restaurant. It's the first time Aurora saw it. It really is all about Aurora. Like all the people working there are just like, oh, hi, happy birthday. And they're talking to her. They're like, no, it's his birthday. Like, just keep concentrating on her. That's please bring out the sparkling candle for me. But she loved it. She loved it all, but she wasn't really eating that much. And I said, I wonder what this is all about. Is it really just the teriyaki? Or is it something else? And she came home and she's running around. She's playing with her uncles and all that. She's smashing Matt over the top of the head with a pillow over and over again. She went at it hard. But she didn't really have that much cake, though she helped me sing. She coordinated everybody singing and all that. And then probably around 8 o'clock, we let her really stretch it out last night. She was like, I'm tired. And I picked her up, and it was like Jane Addams being carried by the creature of the Black Lagoon. I'm like carrying her. She's just back. I said, oh, okay, what's going on here? Bring her upstairs. She's a little clammy. She's a little warm. Is it just that she's running around? Well, went to bed with about a 99, woke up with about a 100.5, and it stayed around 101 all day today, and she's around 98 now. We'll see. Hopefully over the night it breaks. I don't know what the hell she has, but I took my vitamin I, and after this I will have myself a little bit of dinner and take some more zinc, and I will do the Navage nasal thing or whatever, and then the rest is in God's hands. Hopefully my terrain is strong enough. But tonight we have two great guests, one in the first half, one in the second half. Robert Phoenix is coming on to talk about the eclipse. Going to be talking about all the things that he's picking up astrologically. Want to just talk about that, how it lays into the overall trajectory that we're going in this year, going into 2025, and any other cultural ditties that pop up along the way, because, Robert takes a great interest in all things human. In the second half, Ryan Gable is coming back on at around 8:15 or so. By 8:20 he'll be on, but maybe a little bit earlier. And he's going to be talking specifically about the NASA experiments. Now, we're going to have my astrophysicist friend, Max, on with us on Friday night to talk a little bit more about those experiments from the standpoint that he has been, he's been briefed on, or I don't know how intimately involved he is with any part of that that launch that's coming on Monday. Whole bunch of stuff. CERN is getting knocked into gear on Monday. Those rockets with NASA's going on up, and the whole thing with the rockets that Ryan is going to be talking about tonight is not in any way, shape, or form that, although we're talking about weird synchronicities here. He wants to point out and lay out that this is essentially a carbon copy of an ancient Egyptian ritual. So I can't wait to see all this laid out here. And because, NASA's, background, the whole rocket program is just rife with occultism and ritual magic and all that. So it'll be a fun time. It really will. And as for you guys, you can always get in touch with me by calling whenever there are little moments that we can take your calls. That's 914-200-0269. And then the other thing that we got for you is the super chats. These are huge, huge. 914-200-0269. You write that down. Write down, quite frankly, superchat.com. Would love to get any of your observations, thoughts, anything that you want in on the action tonight. Remember, Rumble Rants. I read all of your Rumble Rants in the second half of the show, even though we bounce off at intermission. I read all of your Rumble Rants. I read your Rockfin tips. And then, of course, all the gold pills on quitefrankly.tv, powered by Foxhole. So more than a few ways to contribute to the show. But the universal way that I've set up a long time ago is quite frankly superchat.com. So there you have it. All right. Let's see. Tomorrow's going to be great. Like I said, Tartaria. And I really appreciate all of your emails. Birthday emails and everything else. That coffee stream that we did yesterday was really, really pleasant. And I love doing those. A lot more of those coming in the spring and the summer, especially when I can go on the back porch and just enjoy myself a little bit. Let's see. It's still not dark enough to take back the curtain. Still not dark enough. Okay, let's get into the grab bag, shall we? First one up is from metro.co.uk. Listen to this crap here. How an accidental six-legged mouse could one day help fight cancer. Scientists have accidentally created a mouse embryo with 6 legs and no genitals, revealing how changes to DNA can have major impacts on development. Oh, I think we all pretty much understand that change to DNA can alter how a person develops in the formative stages in life and also in the middle of life when you inject things into them that interact with your DNA and reprogram the body to do something it wasn't supposed to do. So don't talk. I want to know a little bit more about this. The team from Gulbenkian Science Institute in Portugal were investigating how a particular protein works during the middle stages of embryo growth. Embryos begin as just a bundle of identical cells. There's your bundle. As they develop, cells specialize and begin to form different body parts, generally starting at the head and moving back toward the tail. Yes, even humans have tails in the early days, but it disappears around 8 weeks. Scientists already knew that in most four-limbed mammals, both with external genitalia, the penis or clitoris, and the hind limbs develop from the same early structures. The team, led by developmental biologist Moises Malo, focused on one particular receptor protein, TGFBR1. The protein, officially called transforming growth factor beta receptor 1, is involved in the expression of genes, basically helping decide which ones to activate where, deciding what cell of each should become, for example, a blood cell, a muscle tissue, or a nerve cell, or, creating 10,000 arms and legs on this poor mouse. In the study, researchers activated TGFBR1 in mouse embryos roughly halfway through development to see how it affected development of the spinal cord. What they found was an embryo that developed extra limbs instead of genitals, with a number of organs. You know why they're doing this, right? They're going to start growing penises and growing vaginas for their other owned experiment that's going on right now. It wasn't quite what the team was expecting. Yes, I know. These things usually are unpredictable. My question to you guys and gals is this. Does it make it? I know it's just a mouse, and that's what they just want you to concentrate on. Oh, it's just a mouse that we gave. It lacks genitals and has 6 arms, and it's a complete freak of nature. I see that as a crime against nature. I don't care if it's just one mouse. That's a crime right there, if you ask me. And leave it to the media and everybody reporting on this to talk about how a crime against nature may help humans one day. Now, I like to see how everyone involved in this. This is just weird. I don't know. I feel bad for the damn mouse and the meddling. Say, well, what if it helps people with cancer? I say, do you really think? Do you guys and gals really think that we're doing everything we can to help fight cancer? I mean, every time Jay Goulinello comes on the show and we have a conversation about anything, it usually comes back around to the controlling of information by very, very large, powerful interests in several fields, not just government, but also all their corporate appendages there. And we're never actually really talking about real human health and human function. So to say, well, listen, we were able to grow 6 arms and legs on this little rodent over here, but don't worry, that nightmarish image will lead us to a breakthrough in cancer research, even though you're not addressing a terribly toxic environment. I'm not talking about CO2. I'm talking about greenhouse gases. We're just talking about everything from the pills that we're popping to the basic biological information that we're ignoring. So I don't know. Maybe if it was another timeline, something like this, you say, "Oh, poor mouse." But you know what? He gave his life to unlock a mystery that we've been trying to crack for a long time. We haven't even tried really cracking anything. Not that I can see. Anyway, here's a CNN.com. If you have something on that you want to say, you can call in or write in, depending on how much time we have tonight. Going to kick this one off in just a second. But first, CNN.com. Germany is going to redesign the Adidas soccer jersey, especially how the numbers look, because they say it looks way too much like the Nazi SS. Now, this is just number 44. I mean, just don't give anybody 44 if you're going to be that retarded about this. But they're saying that it looks way too much like the SS, the lightning bolts. Now, at first, I actually didn't even see it because, of course, they're so crazy that they call attention to it and because they're obsessed with it. But to me, this jersey actually looks like Hitler's face now. Like the 44 actually looks like Hitler to me. It looks like Hitler's mustache. And the Adidas insignia looks like Hitler is winking his right eye. So this actually looks like Hitler's face. Hitler is winking at us. And the Adidas logo is his right eye, his winking eye. Go ahead, Germany. It doesn't even matter what you change the number font to. The fact that the numbers are there, it's the Hitler mustache, and he's winking at us. So you're running into a lot. Watch somebody else is going to tell these freaks this, and they're going to offset. The 44 is going to be like offset over here or something. I don't know. It's going to be like right around here. They're going to offset it. You know what's going to happen. They're crazy. They're like, oh, we have to change the font. I said, does anybody not see that the entire jersey is Hitler's face? Oh, man. Hey, it's Al's birthday soon. 17 days. It's Al's birthday. That's it. Matt brought it up last night. He said, because he came by to have some cake. He said, you know whose birthday it is in 18 days? I said, Big Al. He goes, yup. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. It's time to start the show.
I refuse to go along with this, and I've seen through all of your lies, Barack Obama, you wicked, wicked devil.
one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Let's roll!
Okay. Oh, there's so much to talk about. There is so much to talk about. Of course, there was this earthquake in Taiwan. Earthquake in Taiwan. Now, as far as timing goes, everything is about timing and everything is about circumstance. And, Taiwan has been in the public eye in the last, year or so now. It always is because of the China issue. But, of course, with all the war fronts that are opening up in other parts of the world that is keeping the United States tied up, people wonder if this is an opportune time for Taiwan to be dealt with by China. So when something like this happens, you wonder what's going on. Where was the United States Navy or where was the Chinese Navy at the time? Could this have been some kind of a HARP situation? There's a lot of that going around. I do want to give you this before I bring on Robert Phoenix. I got in touch with Brooks Agnew, who's going to be coming on the show on May 2nd. And I said, Brooks, what do you think about this? Is the Taiwan earthquake legit? And he says, it appears to be legitimate geological activity. He said the quake was too deep to be HARP, as Taiwan registered 17 miles deep, and HARP has a maximum depth of 6 miles. Now, ladies and gentlemen, remember, Brooks broke down for all of us the reasons to believe that the now memory-hold Turkey earthquakes were triggered by the U.S. Navy. So this is just an honest assessment on his end. If you have anything different, please call or write in with it. But he'll be coming back on May 2nd. Who knows what the topics will be that night. Hopefully it's not the moon landing, because they got way too many people upset. Jeez. Very, very sensitive. Very sensitive. Anyway, I just want to put that out there. It also could just be that the polls are getting ready to flip. It could just be that. But let's do this. You guys all know our good friend Robert Phoenix. He has been in the astrology game for a long time, not only studying the skies, but the trends throughout human history, and is generally just a really great guy to talk to about anything. He is a friend of mine, and I'm really so happy to have him back on the show. And it's connecting with him right now. Hold on. The audio is connecting. Give me 1 second. He cannot hear me yet. Give it a moment. This is taking a little bit. It's probably the storm. Why it's taking a little bit longer than usual. Jeez Louise. Man, the wind is really whipping around out there. Come on, connection. I'm just looking at him. I'm looking at Robert Phoenix right now, but he can't hear me. It's behind a glass wall. All right, well, while that happens, I want to bring up a couple of things. First one up is this. We're getting things like this from the sun now. Shield your eyes. The solar eclipse conspiracy. Oh, here he is, Robert Phoenix.
I'm here.
Robert, you hear me?
I can hear you.
Well, listen, it's so great to have you on. It's been a while. I think it's been since Christmas. How's everything? I'm very, very sorry about the passing of your mother, by the way. I saw that. We haven't spoken since, but been thinking about you, and I hope all is well.
Yeah, it's always, well, life-changing when somebody passes, right, in your life. And she'd been living with me for since I think June of last year. So it was good to have some time with her. And yeah, it's just a weird passage in our experience. And, all of a sudden this person's just not there anymore. And, towards the end, it was very painful to watch her suffer. That was hard. But you know, all said and done, I think she's in a better place, and she did some remarkable things with her life, and she left behind a lot of really good people and good friends who miss her dearly. And you know, I mean, I'm not sure much more we can get out of life to maybe a statue or a street named after us, right? So
Yeah. Well,
all in all, I think, as far as death can be, it's a positive thing because she's in a better place.
I believe that wholeheartedly. And let me ask you just about her and your connection. I mean, based on she knows what you do. Do you feel like you have what inherent gifts or talents you believe that you have taken from her, if anything? Did she have a background, studying the sky? Did she have any personal interest in what you do prior to you picking it up, or is this something that you just came out of nowhere and turned a career into?
We could have been more different, actually, in a lot of ways. The one thing that we shared was we shared a love of baseball, and she grew up being a Yankee fan. Well, you got your Yankee cap on.
Indeed.
So she grew up watching Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford and Hank Bauer and all those guys, right? So that was her era, and her father kind of got me into baseball, where he showed me the sporting green, which was a section of the newspaper in California. And that's where I started to read about sports. And that was 1968. And that was sort of the rise of the Detroit Tigers, kind of an interesting era. So we enjoyed baseball together. Her political views were decidedly conservative. Other than that, she didn't really understand what I did in a lot of ways. And if I got anything from her, she had an amazing work ethic and was extremely conscientious. So I'd like to think that some of that work ethic and the conscientious nature that she had is part of what I do. So yeah.
I hope you don't mind my asking. I like coloring in the background of people I consider friends, and of course,
it's a good question. It's a really good question, and I'll tell you what's really interesting is that I didn't make this connection until I really started to like drill down on the important female members of my life. But my mother, my grandmother, my second wife, and my current girlfriend all share Venus in the sign of Aries. And I thought, well, isn't that something? They all have Venus in Aries. So, she's part of that story as well, whatever that means, right?
Mm.
By the way, happy birthday. Belated happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm sure that the stars told you a lot about what the hell I'm plugged into at this point. But that's crazy. Those synchronicities just within the relationships you have within your immediate circles. Well, it almost begs the question of whether or not it's preordained, or if you're just a magnet for certain types of people. Although I don't know how you can attract a parent, but that is it's something to think about.
Yeah. Well, astrologically, my fifth house has Aries. So the fifth house is all about like love and children and passion. And so clearly, I had a very different relationship with my ex-wife and my current girlfriend that I did with my grandmother or my mother. But it's also the house of children too, as well. So, theoretically, right, I am my mother's child biologically through birth. So there's part of that. I'll tell you though, Frank, the person that I did get some of this from was my grandmother. You know how they say these things skip generations, right?
Yeah.
My grandmother was very interested in astrology, even though she didn't understand it as like a practice or an art. And she was pretty eccentric. I mean, she was kind of a loon, but she was cool and she was different. And she spent a lot of time up in the top floor of her house, like dialed into CNN all day. She was like an information junkie. And then at night she would listen to these late night talk shows in the Bay Area. And I think I played her a video cassette, not a video, a audio cassette of me being on an FM show one time. And so she heard me like, talking about music, and I was on the show with this guy, and she was from the South, and she said, "Bobby, I really think you should have a radio show about astrology one of these days." And I think it was around 26 at the time. And I was like, "Hey, that's a good idea. I'll file that away." So, through osmosis or the skipping of this generation, it's like, that was more of a connection in some ways than my mother.
Yeah.
I think I got the work ethic from my mother, but I got the kind of eccentric, information driven, interest in astrology from my grandmother. And what's also kind of interesting is that on my mother's side, her father, who really wasn't, anything important in the world, but he was really obsessed with like esoterica and the occult in his own way, which was weird, right? Like one time we went to the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose where we lived, and he didn't want to leave. Like he thought that this thing was the most amazing thing he'd ever been to, and he wanted to go back again the next day. So he had this weird kind of like side of him that I'm not even sure he understood. Right. So again, this like kind of trickle down through generations.
That is something. It's just male pattern baldness for me. That's the only thing that was that got past. That's what I could point to. But hey, listen, I love getting background of friends, and I like filling in those little blank spaces. I feel like I get to understand where you're coming from a little bit better. But let me ask you this just straight up, because I just before I spoke with you, I threw a couple of thoughts out there about this earthquake. People who are looking at it from a geological standpoint don't really see any technocratic foul play. But as far as when things come, when things happen in a long line of events and a very chaotic and prophetic kind of a year, what are you thinking about? First thoughts or anything else you did with the earthquake? And then we'll just get into general world-class hype that is being delivered about this eclipse.
Well, I put a post on Twitter today, and I think it was 1998. There was an earthquake in Taiwan, believe it or not, Taiwan. And it happened roughly at the same time, meaning that it was about a quarter of a moon away from the solar eclipse that would take place. And it was not in the eclipse path. So I looked at that and said, wow, isn't that mind blowing? And it was a 7.3 or something like that in Taiwan. And it was, like almost a mirror of the same position of the moon where we are in this eclipse. And again, this eclipse is not anywhere near the eclipse path of Taiwan. So I'm thinking this is really fascinating that this event has reoccurred once again. So there's that. And there seems to be a pattern of earthquakes, and they that are around eclipses. And they don't always have to be on the eclipse. They could be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after the eclipse. And there seems to be a pattern of earthquakes that are more connected to lunar eclipses than solar eclipses. But that said, they're there. There's certainly a track record for these things. And so buckle your seatbelts. We're in for a ride, and we are in the eclipse zone. So, technically speaking, in astrology, you've got a week and a half before the eclipse, and then a week and a half after the eclipse. It's about a 3-week period. So we're in the eclipse phase right now. And then I'm sure that there's all this really high strange going on.
Oh
And
yeah. Well, I want to get into some of that. I
yeah,
want to take it one by one. Either what I don't understand. Number one is the obviously I guess it's actually the easiest to understand when I think about it again is the media hype, because there's a lot of weird things going on. Of course, you can say, well, NASA wants to send these 3 rockets up because there's some really good atmospheric data that could be gleaned from this positioning of the Earth and the sun and the moon and all that stuff. You can say that CERN has to get fired up because there's very a fleeting window of opportunity to get certain kinds of information while the Earth, the sun, and the moon are in this kind of position. But then there is more. We go into the red heifers. That's going to. We have to talk about that in a little bit. It's not going to be on Monday, but we're talking imminent with that as well, and so much more. But when you see the media saying, "Oh, there's some crazy conspiracy theories out there," it's like for the most part, they started it. I mean, telling people to save food and have food and water on hand, shutting down traffic in schools. I understand because there's a big influx of people going into towns, small towns and villages that are in the path. But man, oh man, do you ever suspect what this could all be? The chaos in that what they want to do within that margin of chaos that they're stoking.
well, we certainly didn't have these kinds of, these foreshadowing of events or any of the hype or the frenzy in 2017.
None of
Where
it.
we had, and there was nothing. It was here comes the eclipse. But this is quite different, and I think that part of it has to do with the astrological assignation of the sign of Aries. And when we think of Aries, we think of, things that are connected to war and danger and conflict and violence and action and first responders. Like first responders are all Aries, right? Like when you go into a situation, right, you're there to, offer up some triage or, attend to trauma in a very, immediate fashion, right? So all these things fall under the rubric of Aries. So it doesn't surprise me that, we would have a lot of Aries messaging that would be just a part of the eclipse in general. The last eclipse was in Leo, and it was right at the final degrees of Leo. And here we are smack dab in the middle of Aries. So I think the sign itself begins to govern some of the things that are driving it. And then there's, of course, like the social engineering component. And you know, you and Cameron up in Canada at McGill University, came up with this thing called psychic driving, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And psychic driving was basically these techniques which would drive people mad and begin to split their brain. And this is where they began to practice the development of alters, was through psychic driving. And it almost feels like the lead up to this eclipse kind of falls into that psychic driving territory, where things are an overload in a lot of ways. And when we're on overload, when we're being hit with all these different things, from cities being told to shut down and declare a state of emergency, to the more esoteric and obscure stuff like NASA and the Devil's Comet, like how much can people really handle?
Yeah.
In terms of being able to process all of that, right? And we're already on overload anyway. So let's just pile more on top of it, and let's see what we can cook up with the human experience, and let's see where we can drive some people. So I think that's part of it. I mean, part of this seems to be like a social experiment in some ways, but then again, you can't overlook some of the symbolism involved as well. When NASA basically names these 3 rockets Apophis, right? The world serpent, which is supposed to consume the sun, the symbolism becomes, pretty vivid. And even the Devil's Comet, which is supposed to be in the tail of the eclipse. And then the last time that was here was 70 years ago, was 1954. And that's when Bill Haley and his comets recorded Rock Around the Clock. And a year later, it would be released. And of course, rock and roll would be known as the devil's music, right? So that's happening during that time. The other thing that happens in 1954 is the hydrogen bomb and the test explosion at Bikini Atoll. So, it's another little wrinkle for 1954 in the year that this Satan's Comet or Devil's Comet last appeared. So again, a lot of this symbolism is really powerful stuff. And we also have a Mercury retrograde in Aries during this eclipse. So, that could mean anything from power being shut down, people not being able to get out of places, travel plans being disrupted. So there is, there's plenty of doom at the doom buffet for this eclipse.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's ultimately that's why, at least for me, and I know a lot of people in this audience, it's just all right. Well, let's see what happens on Monday. I bought Yankee tickets because they're having the games. They're starting the game at 2:00 on Monday, just so that everybody could be in the stadium for the 3:25 p.m. peak of it all. And where in the Bronx, it's only gonna be like 91% covered, but still, that's really the extent. I'm not running into a bunker or anything like that. On the same end of that, though, or I should say at the opposite end of that, like you have brought up, we know that people plan they plan things that are very important to them around these types of events. Whether it is because there is some kind of a measurable increase in power or some kind of influence that could be grabbed and steered or whatever, or if it's just superstition or whatever the hell it is. A lot of people who dabble with metaphysical things, they like planning for this kind of stuff. So I mean, when you see NASA getting in on the fun and CERN getting ready to fire up what they got going on over there with the particle collision and all that, you wonder, okay, well, perhaps the real red herring is counting how many times Nineveh, the town of Nineveh, is shows up in the eclipse path over here, and just counting town names in the path. Maybe that's the real distraction. Whereas some people out there are taking it pretty serious for reasons that we may never actually get all of the details, if any details at all.
Yeah. And there are people who use events like this for occult purposes, right? I mean, we know that, there are rituals that take place on full moons. And they're even at times really benign rituals. Like there used to be these full moon rave parties, out in California when I lived there back in the 90s. And, that's a benign ritual, but, there are much more, I think, complex, intentional, and darker rituals that happen, during these cyclical moments. And, this is a really powerful eclipse. I mean, it is a total eclipse, and it basically slices the country in two, up the middle. And, when I first started to look at it, the thing that really got me is where it enters, the landmass, and it enters the landmass in Sinaloa, Mexico. And I thought to myself, well, look at that. It's going to cut right through the heart of cartel country, right? That's where it hits land. And eventually it meets up with the migrant path. And then it hits the United States right at Eagle Pass, which is this major trafficking point that separates the United States from Mexico. And I thought to myself, well, isn't this interesting? We've been, we're going to at some point confront this massive migration. and whatever is buried inside of this massive migration.
You've been talking. You've
Right.
been hot on this subject for a long time, especially with the cartels, MS-13. I mean, you've been very for months. You coming on this show, you've been saying, "Listen, this is the sleeper. This is the big one over here, the real Tet offensive."
Well, it certainly feels like that. And the eclipse, it would be like a harbinger of an event from a physical perspective, coming right up from Mexico and right into that migrant path and hitting land here in Eagle Pass, Texas. And it feels like it's just a ticking time bomb. Like, at what point are we going to have to deal with what's been buried, or what's been occulted, we'll use that word again, inside of these, massive migration movements? Like, who's in there? What's hidden in there? And in a lot of ways, it kind of mirrors the sun, right? Like, something is hidden, something is occulted, something is not being observable to our normal plane of view. So I feel like this is a part of the story, and a part of the story that at some point we're going to have to deal with. Are we going to have to deal with it during the eclipse? I don't know. But I guarantee you, at some point between now and the end of 2025, we're gonna have to deal with this thing.
Yeah.
And I think the eclipse really is a trigger moment, which I've talked about. And the trigger moment extends into the end of 2025, when Neptune and Saturn, using Placidus, move into the sign of Aries together. So we have this eclipse in the sign of Aries, and then we have this really important change into the guard with these two outer planets, and Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And I feel like, once this eclipse hits, we're in this continuum that takes us deeper into that Saturn Neptune conjunction. And when you get into that, it's a whole ball of yarn that you can untangle. But in my estimation, it's not really provident, right? Because Saturn in Aries is in its detriment. Aries wants to express itself. It wants to act. It wants to be independent, right? Aries represents the individual, and Saturn is limitation. Saturn sits on top of Aries and says, no, you can't do that, right? It thwarts the energy of Aries. And then Neptune comes over the top of that and can bring delusion and illusion, and Neptune rules religions, right? And so we have this weird kind of confluence at that time, where whatever happens from the eclipse moving forward, it's like a gateway to the end of 2025. The other thing with the eclipse is that it dogtails the New Madrid fault line. And that's been something I've been keeping my eye on for a while. And we talked about seismic activity at the beginning of the show. And, worst case scenario, we have an Edgar Casey-like event, and the New Madrid fault line becomes a small ocean in the middle of the country. Now, is that going to happen? I would say the chances of that are probably pretty slim. But that said, there could be the beginnings of something with the New Madrid fault line, and we could see an alteration in the Mississippi River over a period of time. And it might not be that long of a period of time. The last eclipse in 2017, when it came out of Oregon, it kind of dogtailed this fissure that comes out of the Cascadia subduction zone, right? So it's interesting that these two eclipses are kind of mirroring these two seismic points in the United States. So I think that's ultimately something to keep an eye on, because there are a lot of maps that show that there's this almost like a much wider Gulf of Mexico that literally splits the country in two. Like, there are no more Great Lakes. It's all just, one massive waterway. I think Edgar Casey's map reflects that. And then there was this guy in the 90s who was kind of popular, Gordon Michael Scallion, who had a vision of what America would look like in the future. And his map resembles Casey's map as well. So, that's New Madrid fault line territory.
I've heard some of those episodes with Scallion. But as far as New Madrid goes, I don't know when the hell this was. This might have been about 2 years ago at this point. Maybe it was around 2021. But it was on Dutch Sense's channel, and he around this one point it was right around New Madrid. It's probably around times that we started seeing like these crazy registering of these laser beams were being registered on all these types of geological maps. It was crazy times because you were seeing, it almost looked like there was some kind of directed energy conditioning that was being done to the land, the actual geography around New Madrid. And, right. Almost like there was like steam pockets. So like almost like things were being heated up and things inside were being messed with. At least that's what everybody was speculating on. Like, what is all this activity right around here? And we're wondering, is the New Madrid actually getting primed to be some sort of a gigantic black swan event in the future? It's either that. There's always talk about, what's going to happen over there at Yellowstone. Is something going to pop off over there? Yeah. I mean, that's something that you can't, at least for the surface level, people who are following world events on a surface level can never blame on, any one political organization over the other. It's just something we all got to deal with. We're all in this together. It's an earthquake. It wasn't an election, but then again we know same thing is going on with this whatchamacallit, this eclipse, where there may be plenty of really amazing conversations to be had. We already started with the rockets. We need to talk a little bit about the red heifers because I know that you've been paying attention to that. But while there are quite a few things of real value to discuss, most people are just either scoffing at the news and letting the news be all there is to this stuff, or they're actually just going and driving themselves nuts. I had somebody in our Gilded chat earlier on in the day said this, I can tell you here in Arkansas, the folks at least some folks are petrified due to the TV programming telling them what to think and feel. They're roping off access to their lawns, their pastures. They're putting up no trespassing signs all over the place so much that a blind person can see them. The stores have sold out on milk, bread, water. It's absurd. Now, I understand that if you're a local, you're a small town and you're expecting a huge influx of city people who want to see this, and your town happens just to be on this path, then you do have to take some precautions into how to manage crowds and how to protect your property and all that. But, the surface level food fighting kind of stuff, it really does take away from, I think, an event that always should be monitored, because people who really do care about how the world is cut up and divvied up, they take very specific care into acting around events like this. And we're seeing that in very mainstream scientific ways. God knows what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, I think people are also really conditioned since COVID.
Yeah.
That they know that there can be these catastrophes, whether they're staged catastrophes, socially engineered, biologically engineered. COVID was a really traumatic event. And I think that people don't want to be that person that, doesn't have any toilet paper or beef jerky or peanut butter, right? Like in a lot of ways, part of this is trauma conditioning that we're experiencing. And I don't really blame people. I mean, the conditions of the world aren't all that trustworthy. And, our society is degrading into a low trust society. So also people have severe doubts about the government being able to help them. And in fact, in most cases, will probably hinder them. So I think a lot of this has to do with, trauma-based programming. And what's interesting about like astrological events or these, cosmic symbols, that when you look at the events themselves, hold on one second, let me shut this down. Hold on. Apologize for that. When you look at some of the events themselves, like when COVID happened, Saturn went into Aquarius, right? From an astrological standpoint, and it made perfect sense because Aquarius is it's all about the group. It's all about the whole, right? And what does Saturn represent? Again, it represents containment, shutting down, pressure. It also represents governments and hierarchies. So COVID happens right when Saturn goes into Aquarius. And then who takes over during COVID? It's Tony Fauci. And what's Tony Fauci's sign? He's a Capricorn. What's the ruling planet of Capricorn? It's Saturn. So you have to ask yourself, right? Like, what's driving the event? Are the conditions driving the event? Are the social engineers aware of the conditions that drive the event? Is it a co-creative operation? I mean, even 9/11, like 9/11 happens when the moon is in Gemini. And Gemini, of course, represents the twins. Saturn is also in Gemini at the time, and it's in an opposition with Pluto. So when we look at a lot of these events, we can see that there are signs and signifiers that represent the events. And the question is, do they piggyback on the event? Or is the event driving the piggyback? Which one is it? I think it's a little bit of both. But clearly there are people that understand this at a very high level. Like when I was a journalist a long, long time ago in California, I sat down with Ronald Reagan's astrologer, and a friend of mine was interviewing her. And this woman was really instrumental in planning the Reagan agenda. So, that's just one example of somebody that the public understands and knows about. This goes all the way back to Queen Elizabeth and John Dee. I mean, there are maguses that operate inside the halls of government, and they're not unaware of what's happening celestially, symbolically. They're quite aware of it.
Let's talk about this on a religious level. Because I brought up the red heifers in Israel. They are about to get fried, these cows, and people can call it silly. They can call it witchcraft pageantry, but it means something to at least certain Jews. It means something to many Muslims because in January I read somewhere that at least one Hamas spokesperson or somebody placed a lot of the blame for what happened in October with the paratrooper thing over there on the red heifers because of what they saw coming, because it was a pretext to rebuilding their temple, which also means disassembly of some very sensitive Muslim landmarks now too, especially that Dome of the Rock mosque, which sits on I believe the footprint of the Second Temple. Now, again, I know that you can't force prophecy. You can't force God's hand into anything if prophecy is at play here and that God has his own timing for things. But that doesn't mean that earthly chaos that moves like this will not result in some severe earthly chaos that a lot of people have to live with. That sometimes that could be, worse than who knows what. All we have right now is an earthly experience, and to turn this into a hellhole, it's not optimal. So I'd love to know a little bit more about what you think about this, because I don't know what it has to do with astral or with celestial alignments and the timing there. I don't know how they're timing this thing, but it seems to be happening imminently, and it's a big thing as far as just stability in geopolitical and spiritual relations go. So what have you got on this one? Because it doesn't have much to do with the eclipse, does it?
Not really, although it does have to do with Passover. And the idea here is that they would slaughter one of the red heifers sometime between now and April 22nd, which is sort of this long tail for Passover. So there clearly is a religious tie to the ritual sacrifice. I had heard it was going to be April 10th, and then I had heard it was going to be April 22nd. You know, when you get into that April 19, April 20, like you're in the days of Moloch, right? That's where a lot of the major, burns take place. Like, for instance, we had Waco happen right around that time. We had the Oklahoma City bombing happen right around that time. There are a lot of events that happened right around 420, right? So it would if they did it during that period, so now you're doubling down. It's not just Passover, it's like these days of Moloch and the great burning. The thing with the red heifer, it's really interesting how there's this connection with Israel and Texas around this thing.
Oh yeah, I would. Do you know anything about that? Sorry to interrupt. You know anything about these Texas ranchers? I would love to know a lot more about the people who provided the props for this insanity. I would never have given those cows up if they were mine.
Well, I do know that they had this guy who's their fixer, and his name is Byron Stinson, and he lives kind of near Waco. Glen Rose, small town in Glen Rose. He's been basically running around Texas for the last decade trying to find these red heifers. So he's their fixer, and he's into it because he's a religious man, right? And he believes in the Bible, and he believes that in doing this, he's carrying out God's will, right? He's only carrying out the will of the Old Testament, which is, derived from the Torah. And this whole red heifer thing is in the book of Numbers. And it shows up in a number of different places. It's talked about in Ezekiel, right? But this guy, through his religious devotion, he says, I felt like it was my duty as a Texan to go out and look around Texas and see if I can find some completely red pure cows that fulfill requirements of the red heifer. And if I could then try to ship them to Israel, Stinson told the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, he didn't find one, he found 5. So what's interesting is that like Kerrville, where I live, which has got the greatest length of time for totality during the eclipse, at I think 432, Kerrville is on the same parallel as Jerusalem. And so there's this weird connection between Texas and Israel and Jerusalem through the cows. Also, I don't know if you've been following this, but we've been having real problems with the cows here in Texas. And they haven't been lactating properly. They think it's some kind of weird zoonotic transmission from bird flu. Right now,
I saw that recently. These are current headlines right now about bird flu.
That's right. Yeah. So the cow thing is prominent astrologically. We have Jupiter in Taurus, which represents the cow. Uranus in Taurus, and Israel is a Taurus country. It was founded in 1948 under the sign of Taurus. So this cow and bull symbolism, is prevalent in both places. Of course, Texas, we have the steer and the longhorn, being the mascot for the University of Texas, right, in Austin. So there's this weird kind of symbiotic relationship between these two places, and this one guy who's the fixer for the cows, and they're gonna slaughter one of the cows on the Olive Mount in Jerusalem. So they're not going to do it on the Rock of the Dome. So they've created this altar on the Olive Mount, or Mount Olive, right, where they're going to slaughter this cow. And now what's interesting is that there's this biblical lore that when Christ was being crucified, that there was a red heifer also being crucified. So there's this kind of weird mashup between these two symbols of crucifixion or slaughter and sacrifice. And I don't know if the telling of the two tales is the justification of one over the other, but they're strangely commingled. And then, of course, there has to be a third temple for the rapture to take place. So there's a reason why you get these, Judas goats, for lack of a better term, farmers, right, or ranchers who are so willing and able to help Israel, because in their mind, there has to be a temple, because that's one of the requirements for the second coming. So he's just doing his part in order to fulfill prophecy, right? From his point of view. From their point of view, it's a very different prophecy, because they're doing this to welcome the Moshiach. And the Moshiach is the Messiah from their world, from their faith, their world Messiah, which means something very different to them than it does to the rest of us.
Yeah.
And if you understand what I'm talking about, right? Once the Moshiach arrives, there's a cleansing, the Tikkun Olam, which takes place. Once the world has descended into a place of filth and degradation, then there's the great cleansing. And the Moshiach is there to basically perform a rabbinical function over the great cleansing. So this is what they're doing it for. It has nothing to do with the fulfillment of prophecy, which is, what the Texas or the dispensationalist Bible heads want. They have a whole different stake in the game. So you have these two separate entities that are invested in this thing for very different reasons, which to me is like, it's insanity.
It is.
But
it
they're
is
all
insane.
trying to get their needs met in a very weird way, right?
It is very insane, because of course, nothing feels very, for lack of a better word, kosher about the sacrifice and what this is supposed to be a pretext for. On the other hand, for the farmers in Texas to be able to pass this off to any organization or group of people in Israel that are doing this because they believe that they are helping move the needle a little bit more in the prophecy era, or in the prophecy arena, is weird too there, especially if they're Christian, because animal sacrifice, Jesus was the final sacrifice. There was no animal sacrifice beyond that. So to be able to provide these sacrificial animals for people from a different faith who are working to completely different ends, it's actually delusional to think that you are in any way, shape, or form on the same page as to where this is all going. So it's true. It's nuts. It really is. And oh man, you know what? You should come back. I don't know when this is going to happen, but we got to keep our finger to the pulse of this, because you should come back on around the time that this happens, so we can get a little bit of a play-by-play or anything else that we see going on at the time. Is there anything else you want to leave us with here, Robert? Because I got to go to intermission, and then I got another guest coming on in a little bit. You know Ryan Gable, right?
Yeah.
You guys all you hang out a lot on Ground Zero, so yeah. Go ahead.
He was on one night on Ground Zero, and I was on, I think, another segment. We didn't overlap though. It's just really weird that we're getting these messages from the World Economic Forum about eating less meat, right? And how cows are contributing to our carbon crisis. And then I think about this sacrifice of the red heifer, and I just kind of expand it out from that event forward. And is this like the sacrifice of the cow itself? Is this going to trigger the great culling of the cow, which then falls right in alignment with the World Economic Forum, because these sacrifices, they have an intrinsic power in a lot of ways, whether you believe them or not. Other people do, and when they do, they generally take action. So I think that there could be some greater secular and dietary ramifications for this thing that nobody's really talking about. So I'll leave you with that.
Well, Robert, it's great to have you back on. We got to do this again soon. Months and months in between appearances, just not going to cut it. It's too much fun talking with you. Let everybody know where they can find you on the regular. You're very active on Twitter, but also talk about your broadcast schedule as well.
Yeah, so I have a little show that I do Tuesday through Thursday on YouTube at 8:00 in the morning Central Standard Time. It's called The Astro Weather, and that's on the 11th House. That's my channel on YouTube. I also do the Friday Farcast there at noon, and I interview guests. This Friday I'll have Russ Winter on. I do Sunday Night Astro Live, also on that channel on Sunday nights. And then I do a kind of a esoteric astrological meta sports show called Serious Sports every other Monday night with Al Dog. So it all goes down there. I got a website, robertphoenix.com. I do astrological readings for people. And that's it. Frank, it's always great to be here. And yeah, let's not wait so long for my next time here. I enjoy talking with you.
Absolutely. Well, that's what we'll do. I have robertphoenix.com in the description of the episode. So hopefully people they pass on right through to you and become a new audience member. I know we have a lot of overlap. I love that. And thank you for the time, my friend. It's been great to speak with you.
All right. Take care, Frank. Bye for now.
All right. Take care. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there is Robert Phoenix. And we are going to take a quick break. We're going to go over to quitefrankly.tv, to pilled.net. Those links are all out there. Real quick, just go to quitefrankly.tv, boom, and press play. There is no paywall. The 7 o'clock show will never be behind a paywall, ever. And in the meantime, just come on over and enjoy independent new media as we bring on another sterling guest in just a few minutes. So we will be right there in a flash. Be right back.
The rest of the show is available exclusively at pilled.net. Follow the link in the description of the episode, get signed up, it's that easy. Or head on over to quitefrankly.tv, just press play. No paywalls, no censorship, no strings attached. So head on over, quitefrankly.tv, powered by Foxhole, and pilled.net.
It's intermission time, folks. Time out to press the like button. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to Quite Frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly. Quite frankly. Quite frankly.
Watch Quite Frankly and stuff.
Quite frankly.